I was totally cut off from the West, I had to learn that I couldn't trust anybody. You were constantly surrounded by people who would be employed by the Secret Service. So you had to be awfully careful about what you said and who you were talking to.
You sort of develop an affinity for these types of moral, social, emotional issues.
Look, I was a child of divorce. That affected me as it does so many people. I think that drew me to it. And I was talking about that sense of calling as a Christian. I had this very strong sense of calling that my life should be about children. There's also a lot we can do, I think, in parent and child education. A lot of people say, oh, we should do more in schools on relationships. I would say nonsense. Because when you're 14, you're not thinking about what a relationship's going to be like when you're 30.
So how can you inspire young people to do what you do? What would you say is the overriding sort of benefit to them in their life that they can see and pursue? And
people invest in career and they want to get the best marks and they want to get the best jobs and this and that and the other. A lot of that is ephemeral. A lot of that doesn't satisfy. But your friendships that you make and maintain and keep for life, they will be your treasure. Your partnership, your children, they will be your treasure if you invest in them.
Patrick, welcome.
Thank you, Giles.
Thank you for being here. I know you've devoted some time away from travelling back to Tasmania. I'm extremely grateful that you're here to talk to me.
Thank you.
I know you much more by name than by nature because obviously you're a very well-known figure in the family law circle. You're currently the Emeritus Professor of Law at University of Queensland. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, what that means is that I'm still part of the university, but I'm not paid for whatever I do.
Okay. But what does the word emeritus mean? I've seen it, but I've never understood its actual name.
It's just a word we use for somebody who's retired but is eminent, and the university wants to keep them as part of the academic team, as it were. So we expected to continue publishing, continue to engage in public life, but we're not carrying the normal load of a full-time academic.
Okay, but before that, you were the dean of the law school at the University of Queensland. Yeah,
I was dean up at UQ for 3 years or so. Stayed on for another year or more, just doing a bit of teaching, and then decided to call it quits.
Okay. And is dean like the sort of the head of the law school? Is that the technical expression?
Yeah, you're the head of the law school, head of the discipline in the university, and that gives deans have a lot of connection to the profession, to the judges.
Yes.
So it's quite an interesting role to have.
And did that involve actually teaching law while you were there as well, or just more of a figurehead and an influencer within the law school?
I tried to teach when I could, but the job required me to travel quite a bit to shine on places. So it's very hard to hold down a responsibility for a whole course and do all the other things the dean has to do. So I tended to be in and out of the classroom. But before that, I was 30 or more years at the University of Sydney.
Well, that's what I wondered actually, was how you migrated north from Sydney, having been here for so long, and how you ended up at UQ.
Well, I had been at Sydney for 32 years and I needed a new challenge, Giles.
Yeah, okay.
But I was also, to be honest with you, concerned about the ever-increasing growth of the law schools. I wasn't sure that there were jobs for people out there. And UQ had developed a new model of a much smaller law school where you could have more intensive engagement with the students. And that really appealed to me. So when the dean's job became vacant, it seemed, well, why not throw my hat in the ring for that?
So you've been an academic for basically 35 years or more, haven't you?
More than that. I began my academic career when I was about 23 years old. So, yeah.
And I think you and I discovered, and I mean, obviously I sort of rang you about 2 weeks ago and we'd never spoken to each other. We knew each other's names from the profession, but we grew up in a similar world in the UK. You a little bit before me, but I think you attended a boarding school in the UK.
I did. I was at boarding school from the age of 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I'm emotionally crippled, you understand why?
I completely understand. And do you understand or know the circumstances of how that for your family became a necessity or a choice?
It was partly family history. So my grandfather was the headmaster of what we call a public school. It's actually an independent private school. And my uncle was as well. So there was a family history of that.
Okay.
But also, when I was young, my parents were going through a very difficult time. They eventually broke up.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's fair to say I was a very sensitive child.
Yeah.
I saw a child psychologist. They recommended I be moved out of the home environment. So
at 8?
Yeah, the
Really?
decision was made to send me to boarding school. My sister was sent as well for a while. She didn't like it.
Was she younger?
Sorry?
Your sister was younger? Or?
Older sister.
Okay.
So she was there for a few years, but. No, that was the main reason that I was sent to boarding school at quite a young age.
And then I think you went from that school, which was a prep school, to a senior school that wasn't related to the junior school. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. So I went to a school called Rossall, which is where my grandfather had been headmaster. So you see these family connections.
Yes. And then how did you sort of transmit yourself from A-levels through to college at University of Oxford and law school? How did you sort of decide that law was the subject you wanted to study after A-level?
Oh, for all the wrong reasons, Giles.
Not surprising.
And that's true of a lot of people who,
yes.
If you talk to a first-year law class, you find this. What made you want to do law?
Yeah.
And it would be, I got the marks, or my parents wanted me to. In my case, I was an avid viewer of a program called Crown Court, which was a drama series.
I think that was before I was around. I hadn't heard of that, or haven't heard of it.
Possibly so, but it was criminal law, and it really interested me. But I did get encouragement from my teachers that I did have a particular kind of a logical mind, which was very suited to law. Yeah. And so from the age of 14, I wanted to study law, and I was lucky enough to get into Oxford. And
were you one of the lucky people that just got an offer of 2Es and you didn't have to get good A-levels? Or
that's exactly right.
Yeah, well, that's,
The system back then was you had to take a special entrance exam, and I did that before my A-levels, so before my school leaving exams for Australians. And so I had an offer, and that meant I could relax with my A levels.
But I'm sure you didn't.
I didn't, because I'm a type A personality.
So you did very well at A level, and which college did you join?
Well, I joined New College, Oxford.
Okay.
New College because it's only 600 years old.
Yes. Is that one of the oldest, or
is it one of the oldest?
Yeah.
And I chose it because it had no modern buildings, not for the undergraduates. And I wanted the authentic Oxford experience of being in these old ivory towers rather than being in some modern student residence, which a lot of the colleges had. And New College was a wonderful experience.
Brilliant. And so, how did you sort of morph into an academic rather than an aspiring barrister or politician or solicitor that you might otherwise have been tempted to do?
It's an odd story.
Okay.
I became a Christian when I was 17, and I had a gap year between school and university. And in my first year at Oxford, I had this strong sense I should be going into the Anglican ministry.
Really?
I was part of a church where a lot of my friends did go into the Anglican ministry, and everybody endorsed that, said, yes, that's the right path for you. And so I didn't go down the track I needed to go down to qualify as a practicing lawyer. I would have had to have organised a place in the postgraduate training long before. But in my final term at Oxford, I began to sense, no, God had a different calling for me.
Okay.
And so I had this no man's land of, well, I'm not going down the ordination track. I'm not going down the profession track. What do? Well, I got a degree which was far better than I deserved. that was the passport to any academic job.
When you say far better than you deserved, you mean you just worked extremely hard and got great results? And
I don't think I worked nearly hard enough. But anyway, be that as it may, I still ended up with a first-class honours degree, which at Oxford at that time was quite unusual. It was only 10% of the cohort. I'm not trying to brag in any way, but the point was that it opened any academic job for me, because having first-class honours from Oxford was not a very common thing.
So just trivially, I'm sure that being in that cohort around that time, there are some famous people around the world that you were in college with or have become attorneys general or something. Is there anyone that you can think of that you know that would be known by people in the profession?
Funny enough, the way Oxford works is you're in a college. And so the close friends I had in law were the 6 other law students who were associated with that college. Yep. One of them is a High Court judge. I doubt that people listening would know him. In England,
yes.
yeah.
Okay.
And the others have gone on to various careers, and some I have lost contact with. But certainly in Oxford generally, yes, you met all sorts of people who could go on to great careers. And one of the lovely things about Oxford is that you're in this college, usually, well, I was there for 2 years out of the 3, living in the college. Yep. You have all your meals with the other students. And you're forced to have conversations about all sorts of things because you're talking to a chemist and a classicist and an English scholar. Yeah. and there is a vibrancy about that. And so many people at Oxford are talented in so many different ways. So it was a real privilege being there, actually.
I imagine pretty inspiring too. There's the movie The Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe.
Yes.
Which obviously got some sinister aspects, but there are elements of college life, albeit I think in America, but college life sort of operating with people at the most extreme ends of academia and intelligence and ambition.
Yeah. And it's not so much what you learn in the university because a lot of that knowledge becomes out of date quite quickly.
Yes.
But it's the learning to debate, learning to think, learning to reason, learning to talk to people with very different views and backgrounds. That was a terrific part of my university experience.
So you talked about sort of the potential ordination path, then the practitioner path.
Yeah.
How did you sort of reject them or not reject them, but sort of move through the middle, if you like, into the academic universe from your law degree? How did that sort of push you forward into academia?
I'd always planned to have a couple of years after university doing other things. I spent a year in Oxford just doing a little bit of teaching and so on. Yeah. I spent a year behind the Iron Curtain, or 9 months behind the Iron Curtain in Czechoslovakia.
Wow.
Surreptitiously engaging in Christian activities. And indeed, there was a very remarkable underground church there with which I had some connections. So that was an unusual career path. But then I got a job at the University of Illinois in America.
Can I stop you there, though? Czechoslovakia, what took you there and how old were you and what was your motivation for being there?
I'd met a couple of Slovak Christians at a conference in Austria.
Yeah.
And Giles, it's hard to explain this if you don't have a faith, but I had a strong sense of calling.
Really?
That God wanted me to go there, and my approach is if I feel God's calling me to do something and it checks out, I do it. And you can test some of these things because I got a British Council scholarship to study in Slovakia, which I shouldn't have got because all these scholarships were for people who spoke the language. Well, I spoke a bit of German, but I didn't speak any Slovak. Yeah. But again, the passport, I had this good degree from Oxford and they weren't exactly overwhelmed with people wanting to live behind the Iron Curtain.
No, I'm sure. But what did you learn about the Iron Curtain that most of us would have no idea about? What sort of sticks out to you the most about that time in your life?
This may sound very odd, but one of the first things I experienced in Bratislava was being in a world without commerce.
Really?
Well, you leave Austria. Bratislava, where I was about 60 miles north of Vienna.
Can I just ask you, what year are we?
1981 to 82.
Okay.
And you've got Coca-Cola signs, advertising signs all around the place. And then you cross the border and you're in a different world. All you see are these signs to the end of the world with the Soviet Union, or these sorts of political signs. And no commerce, no industry that is private. Nobody ever wanted to sell you anything.
It's a bit unusual.
Yeah. So that was a very, very strange world. And although I was actually only about 2 kilometers from the border, I literally heard gunshots from from where I was staying. I could have been 1,000 miles from the border. I was totally cut off from the West. I had to learn that I couldn't trust anybody.
And you were on your own?
I was on my own, but I was part of a church.
Part of a group.
And look, I did trust people, the friends I'd made and so on. But you were constantly surrounded by people who would be employed by the Secret Service. And so you had to be awfully careful about what you said and who you were talking to.
And how old were you?
22.
Wow.
So and I met friends or made friends from all over the Eastern Bloc. Many friends from Afghanistan, for example, and then communist countries who were studying in Slovakia. So I got a really remarkable experience of a different kind of life. But I was glad to get out of it.
So let's just go forward quickly. Then you went from there to Illinois University. How did you achieve that?
Oh, they advertised what's called a visiting instructor post, and I could do a master's degree at the same time.
Yep.
So it worked out very well.
Yep.
And I chose family law as my thesis topic. I was studying under a very well-known American scholar, Harry Krauss.
Yep.
So that launched me then on my academic career, and I got my first job after that.
So family law really has been your focus since about then? Is that?
It has been my focus ever since my postgraduate days, yes.
So I want to ask you something, because I've read in your CV, there's an article that you wrote back in 1988 called Leaving Home.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Do you remember the article? And if so, is there anything you can share with me about that? Because that's nearly 40 years ago, at the beginning of your career.
That's interesting. I'd almost forgotten about it. But what that was about was what we do with teenagers who are still not only under 18, but under 16 in many cases, who will not remain at home. An irretrievable breakdown between parents and kids, which is quite common and quite difficult to deal with. And in Australia, that's dealt with under child protection laws.
Yes.
So it was one of my first forays into the child protection area was seeking to understand how we can support parents and teenagers going through a real crisis in which the kid wants to leave home.
But at this point, you're probably late 20s in 1988?
Yeah.
So how did you sort of develop an affinity for these types of moral, social, emotional issues by then?
Look, I was a child of divorce. That affected me as it does so many people. I think that drew me to it. And I was talking about that sense of calling as a Christian. I had a very strong sense of calling that my life should be about children.
Really?
From early on. And so it was a very natural thing for me to be going into academia and working in family law and child protection. A lot of my work's been in child sexual abuse.
Was there a connection between that and your own experience at 8 and beyond, or was it just a coincidence, do you think?
I think there was an unconscious connection.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a conscious one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I've said in 1990, the risk of alleging child abuse. Now, child abuse is a huge issue, but the risks of alleging is a really interesting point. It's the suggestion that somebody could allege, and there's a risk in alleging it. So what if you can, do you remember about those sort of thoughts evolving in you?
I'm not quite sure that was what the article was all about.
Okay,
sorry. It was about how we, as courts, and the family court in particular, deal with allegations of child sexual abuse.
Okay.
And it's very difficult because if a child is 11, 11-year-old girl tells her mum that her uncle's been doing things to her, there's a very high likelihood that's going to be a police matter.
Yes.
And rightly so, and they will do their best to prosecute. They may or may not get a conviction. But the family courts have had to deal so often with younger children where there's just not a lot of clarity about whether the child has been abused at all. A child of 6 and 7 years old, 5, doesn't have the language to explain what's happened to them, doesn't have any understanding of what a sexual contact might be as opposed to any other form of contact. And a lot of these cases end up in the family courts. And as you well know, Giles, I'm sure you've run a lot of them yourself. And it's the too hard basket. So some of what I've been writing over the years has been about how we assess evidence in this murky situation where the mother genuinely believes the child has been sexually abused, and she may be right. The father denies it. And then how do you deal with that when you're trying to work out parenting arrangements for the children? Children who often love their father, well, usually love their fathers, need their fathers, will benefit from their involvement, but need to be kept safe.
So there's another tricky area in the modern court, which is there's the mother and the child, and then there's the stepfather.
Yes.
And it may be a stepfather that's a long-term stepfather, or it might be that the mother it doesn't have a long-term partner but has partners, and obviously the other way as well. But are you sort of picking up on how the courts are dealing with that and the testing of evidence?
Yes, it's another aspect of the whole thing. Sometimes the allegations are by the mother against the father, who are now separated.
Yes,
but sometimes the issue is about another male in the home. I don't even want to use the word stepfather, Giles.
No.
Because stepfather is a word we use implying that the couple are married to each other.
Yes, true.
But quite often you get to be honest with you, a succession of men moving through a woman's home. Relationship might last a year, another one 18 months. So you've got all of these men, maybe living in, maybe not, who have access to children. And this may be quite shocking to listeners, but studies of child sexual abuse have shown that abuse by fathers is actually quite rare.
Yes.
But abuse by stepfathers or other males who are partnered with the mother is something like 6 times as high.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you know that figure, or at least anecdotally. How is that researched? How is it understood? Like statistically, how is it proven that those are the figures? What goes on to identify that?
Those figures, which have been shown many, many times since. The first study which was done was in San Francisco with 930 women who were interviewed, face-to-face interviews, about all aspects of their sexual histories. Of course, this is California.
It's voluntary in terms of its disclosure then.
People are willing to talk about it. But in the midst of that were some questions about childhood experiences.
Okay.
And that's a large sample in our terms. The interviews were in depth, probably 2 or 3 hours, I would imagine. And of the interviewees, 1 in 40 who'd been primarily raised by their father in a 2-parent family, 1 in 40 had been sexually abused by the father. And then of those who had lived for a significant period of time with a stepfather, 1 in 6.
Really?
And that translates similarly to child homicide. It translates to other areas of child abuse. Giles, the good news is that we have made a real effort in child protection, haven't we, over the last 30 years? We've focused a lot on child sexual abuse. People are much more aware of it. And we've reduced the figures enormously in terms of abuse by fathers or father figures in children's lives.
So that brings me on to another question, and I'm completely off my own track here, but in the courts, as in the work I do, there's the question of the weight that should be given to children's views.
Yes.
Obviously, that's a consideration in any parenting case. So what do you feel is a sort of an age, and I'm sure it's a very sort of broad topic, but when boys and girls separately start to be able to express honestly held views that the judges should take into account?
It's a complex question, and I've written a whole book on it with my colleague Judy Cashmore, who's a developmental psychologist, and we interviewed lawyers, we interviewed counsellors, we interviewed judges. It was and we interviewed children and parents. Quite an interesting sort of process. I don't think there's an issue about age. Okay. One social worker put it really well. She said, "Would you listen to a 2-year-old who says they want an ice cream?" Yeah. If you wish to, but you wouldn't take that seriously as a view. Would you take seriously the view of a 2-year-old who was showing real terror about being handed over to her father?
For me, yes.
For me, yes.
Yes.
In other words, it's not even what they've been verbalizing, because a 2-year-old might be unable to verbalize that, but you see in their reactions something which ought to really worry you.
Which is using your own nature to assess it.
Yeah. And sometimes children have very strong views, but one of the key things is when you're interviewing a child, not to ask a direct question. You don't ask, now, Sarah, you're 7 years old. Who's your teacher? Oh, yeah, Mrs. Russell. Oh, yeah. Now, you know why you're here. Your mum and dad are having an argument. Do you want to live with mum or do you want to live with dad? There is no way that's appropriate.
Yes.
What you need to do is to try to explore a child's world. What's important to them? How are they experiencing living with mum? How are they experiencing living with dad? How are they experiencing the transition between the two homes? What's working for them? What's not? How important is their sibling relationship? So understanding their world and drawing out from that what that might mean for the parenting arrangements going forward, but trying very hard not to put the child ever in a situation that they have to choose between their arm and their leg, between their mother and their father.
And so those are the sorts of roles that psychologists are doing in the family court these days. And do you feel from what you see or read that the way in which they're going about it is at least in the right direction? Or have you got any concerns about the way in which children are spoken to in the family report context in family law proceedings?
I'm sure that there are outstanding practitioners and there are those who are less than outstanding.
In every profession.
In every profession, that is true. And so listeners may have had bad examples and been on the wrong side of a family report, all those things. Sometimes it's an issue of time. To understand a child's world requires time and engagement with that child. And the system is so overburdened that I think a lot of the time professionals are trying to make quite nuanced judgments based upon a fairly limited amount of engagement with the child. So the best professionals use that time well and are very observant. But you don't have that quality across the board. And that's true of independent children's lawyers who will also interview children, and they are lawyers, and they don't have that social science training for the most part. And yes, I've seen quite a variation in quality in independent children's lawyers.
But there's a very big issue in parenting cases that I observe, which is the line where parents are criticised for saying things to their children in the preceding context.
Yes.
And the line where they outrightly say, well, I don't talk to them because the ICL has to talk to them or the expert has to talk to them. So is there any thinking around what parents should be doing in relation to their children, firstly in terms of informing them about proceedings or not, and secondly in how they can look at their own children and get into their world about the way in which their behaviour and their spouse's behaviour is affecting the children?
So let's start with being real about this.
Yeah, no, exactly.
A client comes into your office as a family law solicitor.
Yes.
And they have a parenting dispute, and one of your jobs will be to explain in outline what the law is. You say, well, the judge has to decide the best interest of the child, and there are the following factors. You go through those factors, and one of them is the views of the child. And it is just human nature for every parent to go straight home from that interview and to try to influence that child. And that happens. It happens a lot, as you well know from your experience, which is probably very much greater than mine in the courts, that a lot of that goes on. And so we need to try to help parents early on. And in that first interview with the lawyer is very important.
Yes.
To say the best thing you can do for your child is to keep them out of this conflict.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think not talking about the proceedings is absolutely right. There will be times when you have to, if you're going to take your child to the independent children's lawyer or to the family consultant, or they keep changing their name, but to professionals, they're going to have to understand something about that. And do everything possible to protect that child from a sense they have to choose between their parents, at the same time wanting to listen to their views and experiences. So it's a tricky balance.
It's extremely difficult, and many of my clients, through just conversation, they just struggle to know what they should do, and they struggle to know how to do it. And what is, I think, difficult is that the profession and the courts, there's a certain approach and a protocol, and yet the lived experience of the family is incredibly difficult, because if they start from a dispute before they even come to the court, all sorts of things can have already happened before they come to the court.
Absolutely.
And that's where it's difficult, because at the same time, they don't want to rush off to the court if they don't have to. So it's a difficult thing, and it's difficult for people all the time.
It's a real crisis in their lives.
Yeah.
I've had that myself in my own experience. You asked at what age? And I responded by saying, well, there isn't an age. It's all about what the child is vocalizing. What I would say about age is that the older the child is, the more agency they have. And the harder it is to force upon a child parenting arrangements which they really don't like.
Yes.
And I had a classic example of this actually in writing the book, that particular book, The Voice of a Child, because we managed to interview a child, a mother, the independent children's lawyer, and the judge.
So, and the child and the mother, they're the related people?
Yeah.
The children's lawyers in the case, and
the children's lawyer in the case, and the judge who decided the case.
Wow.
Quite by accident. When I interviewed the judge, one of our standard questions was, tell me about a case where you went against the views of the child. Okay. And this judge, who I won't name, begins to tell me a story. I thought, I know this story. We've interviewed the child and the mother, and in the end, we interviewed quite separately the lawyer, as I say. So we got a really rounded picture of the case. And what had happened was that the father was born overseas. I'll put it like that. Yep. He moved to North America for work, leaving the child essentially in the care of the mother. He was a very devoted father, and he did his best, despite the distance, to keep in contact with his child. He would fly back. And this happened when the child was very young. But come about 11, and the father decides to move back to Australia. And at this point, he wants to play Happy Families. Yep. And what's the standard arrangement? They weren't in the same city. Every other weekend or after school holidays. They weren't too far apart. They were in different cities. Yep. And this 11-year-old girl said, well, I don't know him. Yeah. I'm not against being with my father. There was no sense of difficulty or opposition, but I spent all this time with my mother, and how do I relate to this man? Look, he might have been a little bit rigid in his views. And the judge looked at the situation. Here's this loving, caring father. Children need fathers. It's one of the things we keep forgetting. But fathers play a very important role in children's lives. So you understand why the judge would say yes every other weekend and half the school holidays. But this 11-year-old girl voted with her feet. She just went on strike.
Didn't go.
Didn't go. And you would have experienced this. 11, but 13, 14, absolutely kids are making their own mind up, and you can't force them to go. So I think that's the reality about children's views. You've got to try to understand their world, and there's no point trying to force on them arrangements which they won't live with.
And that is a daily difficulty that judges have to deal with, because the question of whether weight should be applied is something that an independent children's lawyer may have given some thought to and make a submission about. And then there's also the independent expert who will basically give a view. Yeah. And I've read a number of reports where they're too young to give some weight to that child's view, but then there's this view where perhaps it's creeping towards something weight should be given. And generally there's not a really expressed conclusion. It's still left to the judge. But that's what judges are, I suppose, chosen for, to make those difficult decisions.
And the hardest cases, I think, are where the report writer, the family report writer, and the lawyers, and the judge, they all know what's going on.
Yes.
That is, that this mum, if I may say so, has been absolutely in the ear of this child. It could be the father.
Could be, yeah.
And the child is essentially mouthing what the parent who influences them wants them to say. And you get this, don't you, with kids go into the room with the family report writer who's met them for the first time, and straight out they say, whatever it is that their parent wants them to say. And we know that's happened, and we know there's that influence, and we know it's not a good influence, it's a negative influence. But there's no point just saying, oh, well, it's a negative influence. It's still what the child thinks and believes.
Yes.
And so the question then I think for the judge becomes, well, do I go against the wishes of the child, knowing that in all likelihood they may settle down and accept that that's what the court's decided? Or do I accept that they've been influenced against the father, maybe very hostile to the father, maybe hostile to the mother, and I can't change that? That's a hard call to make.
It's very hard. And so that brings me on. I mean, I saw something that you'd written on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago about the amendments to the Family Law Act. They're extremely topical, both for practitioners and the courts and litigants. You've written about that, and there's a new sort of definition around family violence, which is around economic and financial control. Are you able to share a little bit about your understanding of the new law and the direction it might take people in?
Well,
it's a big subject, I know.
The definition of family violence in the law now runs to 1.5 A4 pages of text in that article that I wrote. And it's unnecessarily and foolishly complex.
Yes.
So the definition of family violence in the Act basically says that if it's conduct of whatever kind, which causes somebody to fear or causes them to feel coerced or controlled, it's violent, threatening, or other conduct which causes people to be afraid or to feel coerced or controlled, that's relevant to the family law decision. And a recent decision of the court has said, well, even if it didn't cause fear, and even if there wasn't coercion and control, if there was physical violence, that's violence too. So that's just a slight tweak on the whole thing. And they gave the example of a woman punching a man, where the man's not afraid, but it's still violence. And then there's all of these other things that they say may be family violence, or they may not. And litigants focus in on this often, as lawyers do, and say, oh, this is this financial abuse, or is it emotional abuse? And I don't think it's at all helpful, because take emotional abuse as an example. There was one study done in Arizona of people waiting. They were engaging in mediation before going into the court or whatever. 98% of the women said they'd been emotionally abused. Guess how many of the men said they'd been emotionally abused?
I have no idea.
97%.
Okay.
Definitions like that become so vague that everybody who's been through a breakup can say that they can point to bad behavior by the other person. And financial abuse is one of those things which can be quite vague as well. He's not paying his child support or whatever it is. These are, I'm afraid, the common conflicts of people who can no longer live together.
So can I stop you there?
Yeah.
I mean, there's the Australian Law Reform Commission, I think, or is it committee?
Commission, yeah.
Commission. And you wrote about the sort of the intention of that body. Were you personally involved in any way in the shaping of the law, or being asked to give some submissions about it?
I find myself very often in a role of shaping the law one way or the other. I did make a detailed submission to that Law Reform Commission.
Did you?
That the ideas in that submission were certainly very evident in their final report. So, but look, that's my job.
Yes, you were asked to do that. I mean,
well, as an academic, I would always in my field of specialisation, make submissions to parliamentary inquiries and commissions. Yes. And, if you have a body of knowledge, that's useful to decision makers.
The thing if it's a part I'm really interested in is there's the academic side of the submission.
Yeah.
And how that evolves into the law. And then there's the political aspect of the law and the way in which, the Attorney General's Department ultimately decides it's written and is going to be done. Is there in your view, is there a sort of an element to which this new amendment has become overly political rather than truly trying to solve legal problems?
Yes.
And how? Do you mind explaining?
There's been a very big shift between 2006 and now. Amendments were made to the part of the law concerning children in 2023, as you know, and in 2024 to do with property. And I was very involved with the legislation back in 2006. I was very involved with the Parliamentary Committee, which wrote an extremely influential report. And I was chair of the Family Law Council at the time that legislation went through. So, look, I had a heavy involvement. And there was a real attempt to address the issue of family violence and say this is really important to parenting as it is, not then property as we weren't concerned with the children's law. But at the same time, we want to encourage the involvement of fathers in children's lives. For the most part, children want and need a relationship with both parents. Of course, you have to prioritise protecting them from abuse and violence. But if the parents are separated, a lot of the issues about violence have gone away because they're no longer in the same house. There's no longer the triggers of conflict that there was or proximity to each other that there is when you're living under the same roof. So I think we made a real effort at getting the law right. In 2011, a government had changed and it tweaked that law a little bit. They made it sound like it was a major reform. It was actually just a minor tweaking, to be honest with you. But then in the last 2 years, the government or the parliament has pretty much wiped out the nuance and sophistication of the law, which was passed with almost unanimous support in 2006.
How? How has it done that?
Well, they wanted to simplify the law, and I agreed. It was overly complex. It was, a law written by a committee. There were influences here and influences there and tweaks here, all in the political space. This all happens when you're talking to the backbench MPs and so on. And it was convoluted and a little bit difficult, but it has settled down. So they wanted to simplify that, and that they could have done that. But there was a very strong pressure, I think, from the domestic violence advocacy groups, in a sense, to make the Family Law Act all about violence rather than being all about kids. And I think that the Parliament went a very long way in that direction in a way which has been detrimental to the system. And one of the ways in which they did that, Giles, was that we had in the legislation a strong emphasis on the involvement of both parents in children's lives.
Yes.
As long as it was safe.
Yes.
As long as it was safe. They wiped out almost every single reference to the importance of fathers.
And why do you think that is?
Well, it was done at the political level. It was not what the Law Reform Commission recommended.
Okay.
I don't remember any parliamentary committee recommending it.
So this is where I'm extremely interested, because you're really saying then that the Law Reform Commission had a view about the law and the way it should be represented.
Yeah.
Representative of community, I imagine.
Yeah.
But then you've got a political will that seems to be diverging from that.
Yes.
And is that political motive? Is that a politically motivated move for reason that they're not willing to listen to the Reform Commission and they've got an underlying motivation to, I suppose, stay in power or represent a certain theory? How is that occurring?
Every incoming government is beholden to certain constituencies.
Yes.
There may be different constituencies between the coalition and the Labour, but they're beholden to constituencies. And one of the things that they will want to do is to deliver on what those constituencies have been lobbying for and have helped them get elected and have funded their campaign. And I think for very good reasons, the government wanted to respond to concerns about domestic violence. We all want to. And so there was a very strong influence of the lobby groups around family violence, women's groups in particular, to whom the government coming in wanted to be able to respond. Back in the early 2000s, there were also very strong fathers groups.
Yes.
And they've virtually disappeared.
Really?
Yeah.
They have disappeared now, virtually.
Yeah.
That's the present situation.
In terms of, yes, in terms of having any sort of engagement in camera in the corridors of Parliament, they're almost invisible.
And do you have an understanding of how that shift has occurred over those years?
Not a great deal, but so much depends on individuals who campaign. There was one of the leaders of the fathers groups. They weren't fathers groups. They called themselves shared parenting groups. And I think that's what they were really saying is, despite the breakdown of the husband-wife relationship, the mother-father relationship must continue for the sake of the children. So they're very much concerned with shared parenting. They wanted a presumption of equal time. One of the leaders was a senior barrister, a QC as we used to call them, and now it's a KC. And he'd gone through his own divorce and so on. And people are motivated by these things. And look, children grow up. What made you impassioned at one stage in your life no longer is important. And of course, if you get legislative reform that you wanted to achieve, or something that achieves some of your goals, you've been there, you've done that, you've got what you wanted to get. And so you move on. And so you don't have a generation of leaders necessarily coming forward with those same skill sets, the same commitment to legal reform. And so the fathers groups were just absent in the debate.
Wow. That's a shame. That's a great shame. But so a lot of the law is really dealing with the effect, isn't it? It's dealing with the result of violence. It's not so much dealing, at least as I appreciate it, with the cause. And it feels as though politically all of the attention is on the effect and, almost like the punishment of the effect. A person, whether it be male or female, perpetrating violence is to be punished or to be prevented, but not understood, not sort of appreciated for what the cause of that effect is. How do you see the cause of a lot of this violence that's occurring being dealt with politically or legally or socially?
So we do need to take domestic violence very seriously, and we do.
I agree. Yes,
and we do. We know that the most dangerous point in a woman's life is when she's wanting to separate out of a violent relationship.
Yep.
We have a shocking number of murders each year of women by their intimate partners. All of this is well known and true and important. But if you look at community surveys, and we've done this for 40 years, we've gone out with very well-constructed, careful surveys of what's happening in the community. First of all, we discover that family violence is very common, sadly common. I mean, the figures recently published reports in Australia in the last couple of months, 25 to 35% of people saying they've been victims of violence. And some of those victims of violence have been subject to what we call coercive control. And coercive control is where a man is, in my view, always men. I could be wrong, but almost always men, engage in such power plays over the women in their lives that it's not just physical violence, not even just the threat of physical violence, but it is control over every aspect. This is where financial abuse comes in, that they control the money so that they don't have a chance to go out, try to isolate them from family and friends. It's terrible. And the overall impact of that, as you can imagine, on a woman's self-esteem. And they say, look, it's not just the physical violence. It was that I was like a prisoner in my own home. And it's extreme. That's coercive control. And that's very serious. It's almost always, if not always, male behavior. But it's not the majority of family violence.
But can I stop you there? Because the bit that I'm interested in is what is the underlying cause of that behaviour? How does the person who's behaving like that become either capable of doing it emotionally or incapable? It's involuntary. Where's the sort of question around the cause of it to stop the cause or interrupt it and break it?
We don't have nearly enough understanding of that. But let me give you a few pointers. I mean, one is traditional patriarchal misogynistic sorts of attitudes. But we have to remember that at one point this couple fell in love.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
He can't have always been like
and
that.
conceived. Yep.
Yeah. And, you know, that pattern of coercive control, which does not make for a happy and healthy marital relationship, is one which presumably emerges. Recent research just published in the last 2 or 3 weeks has shown that a lot of these men have significant mental health problems. They're profoundly depressed. If you have a poor relationship with your father, that is a strong indicator of being more likely to abuse women. And conversely, if you have a lot of social support, you're much less likely to. So we need to look at what's happening in these men's hearts and minds and childhoods to really understand what is driving them. And of course, there's a place for punishment. Of course, there's a place for police. There has to be. But we also need to have a therapeutic understanding of what is driving this sort of behavior.
So how does that occur? Like, I mean, you've obviously done an incredible amount of work in understanding and analysing and contributing to the evolution of the law. But how do we, in a community sense, start to work on the cause, identify it? Like you've given some, criteria there, and create a political will to actually do that, because that would seem to me to be the best investment.
Yeah, I think it's essential that we understand that family violence takes multiple forms, and that coercive control that I was talking about is one form. But the majority of family violence is actually couples who have really bad fights, which escalate into punching and throwing things and slapping. And
can I stop you there? Because I agree. I was preparing for this morning in a coffee shop, and a solicitor friend walked in and sat down, and she was off to the district court this morning because she was acting for a lady who is in fact from another country, and her husband's from another country, and the couple are married. And they had a stand-up fight together physically in the street, and they both got arrested. And this morning was basically the prosecution of the two of them. And they're married and they still live together. But they literally had a physical fight in the middle of the street and created a public order problem, and they were arrested and charged and now prosecuted. So that's exactly what's going on, is a sort of a fight physically and emotionally about a disruptive issue between them, but they're still married, and there's no family law proceedings, but the state is prosecuting them. So that's how does that sort of think is on the line of what you were just talking about there.
And this is the difficulty the police have. They're called to a domestic violence institute, and we always talk in this binary terms of perpetrators and victims, but that's not the dynamic of what's happened. A really bad argument has erupted out of control. Now, male violence is always going to be far more problematic because we are typically stronger, we're more likely to cause injury. So it's still about male violence in particular. But unless you understand that this is a violent household, which maybe include violence against the children as well, and very often does. And there are violent patterns of relating and resolving conflict which have to be addressed. And Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. We need to be intervening with some of these families by helping them to deal with serious conflict peacefully.
So I was thinking about this as well. I agree with you. The thing is, I mean, even in our Western culture, being a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old, and from I suppose a background of advantage where there may not be any threats to your sort of, I suppose, physical or emotional health, but you get married and you conceive children, and you're working in a busy city, and even with the best will in the world, the best people, can still find life extremely difficult and expensive and end up in a fight.
Sure.
And couples can fight easily. So there's a spectrum,
yes,
obviously, between that, where they might argue or give each other silent treatment and do no harm, but just find life frustrating.
Yeah.
And then there was an example, I think 3 days ago, where in South Australia there was a man arrested and put in jail and convicted for serious family violence against a lady that he was in a relationship for 4 months. So this spectrum is so broad. How do we start to begin to address these issues that I think we're all concerned about?
The spectrum is broad, and I think that's the point. And it's not helped by just focusing on male violence.
No.
That's because all the surveys, they all say the same thing. There are significantly more women who report violence against them than men. But the numbers are quite close. 35% of women who said they had to experience physical violence in their partnership and 25% of men. Those sorts of figures come out of every survey. And many of those relationships continue, they get over the problems and they move on. But it's really important that we focus resources in on helping couples and families resolve serious conflicts without resorting to violence, and then serious conflicts with their children without resorting to violence. Because it's the same, if violence is an acceptable way of dealing with somebody who's resisting what I want, that's not just going to be my wife, it's going to be my child as well. That's the reality.
So looking forward, and we've spoken a little bit about the new law, there's a whole load of legal analysis that goes on around contributions and how they're affected by family violence. Let's just put it in that bucket. The laws changed slightly as well, I think, and put family violence as a forward-looking proposition and how people are going to be effectively compensated from a matrimonial pool in terms of an adjustment to the degree that it's able to be established, looking forward at their current and future financial circumstances. So are you able to sort of share how that now looks in the law and the way in which this might evolve?
It remains to be seen.
Yes.
The division of family property in Australia is the vaguest and worst drafted law in the world.
Really?
By a long stretch,
really?
in my view. The judges are all over the place in terms of how they interpret and apply that law. And this is another area. Now, the new legislation is in some ways quite helpful because in family law, we look back to the past and we look forward to the future. When we look back to the past, what the law is now saying is, has there been an effect of family violence on the contributions you were able to make to the marital partnership? Well, Giles, as you and I know well, we don't actually go through that process of evaluation anyway. We typically say that the contributions during a marriage or a de facto relationship are equal, whatever. Someone looks after the kids, some might prioritize work, but we treat them as equal. It's inheritances and it's pre-marriage assets which tend to make the difference, and then future needs. So I don't think that violence will be very important in terms of that backward looking, because so often you can't show there's an economic effect of that violence on your contributions or how it should matter. Where it will be important and should be important is for those people, and it's mostly women, who say, I am seriously damaged by what has happened. I need counselling support, and that may go on for 2 or 3 years. I can't work full-time at the moment. I can't earn as much as I would others do. And there's a compensation effect there of saying, I need more of the pool of resources because of the violence that I have experienced, and rightly so.
So that sort of brings in a question. I'm aware, and I've read your report around there's no sort of potential claim for damages in a legal sense under the Family Law Act, but the effect and the forward-looking nature probably still is going to need to be examined by maybe the form of expert evidence proving a causation effect between the effect on the person and the future circumstance. So that's an area I'm interested in, because it's going to be fascinating how it works out.
Yeah.
The degree to which expert evidence in a causation sense may be required to prove the effect on the person that might then sound in an adjustment.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see how it works out. I was asked to arbitrate a case a year or two ago. In the end, it fell through. But it was the man in that case actually who had claimed to experience really very serious violence from his female partner, and I think she had a lot of mental health issues. And there was a psychologist's report which made it absolutely clear that this man was traumatized by his experiences, that he was severely impaired, and that this was having an impact on his capacity for full-time work. So you don't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on an expert report. It was clear from the psychologist's 3-page letter, 4-page letter as to what had happened, and very hard to suggest any other cause for his impairment. He was traumatized.
So we're sort of going to get close to a few things I want to ask you about now. Family relationship centres are something that you've been instrumental in developing.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of your past, and now your future is around Publica.
Yeah.
And Publica.org is an organisation you founded. And how do those two sort of concepts relate to one another in your life as an academic and also as a person making a difference in life?
I had an unusual opportunity to talk to John Howard's social policy advisor when he was Prime Minister, and then to talk to John Howard. And there'd been a lot of debate about the future of the family court. There were people who wanted to abolish the court or to go a very long way towards that. And Cabinet was divided on what to do. And so I was called in, and I'd written something. I hadn't published it, but the MPs knew all about it. Saying, well, you could do this. This is how it would work. So John Howard's social policy advisor called me in for a discussion. And I said in the course of the conversation, but John, that's not what I spend my money on. And he ignored me. We continued to talk about a tribunal, which is what was the debate. And then about 50 minutes later, I said, but John, that's not what I spend my money on. And look, he was a bit slow, this fella. But finally, after another 10 minutes, he said, no, you said a couple of times that's not what you spend your money on. What would you spend your money on? So I gave him the vision for family relationship centres. And it was because I had been on a committee which had interviewed people about their experience of all sorts of counselling services available to families. And it interviewed people who had that counselling and support. And they were almost all, very appreciative of the help they'd got from Relationships Australia or Catholic Care or whatever the organisation was. But they also found a lot of people who had not used those services and went to them and said, well, now, in your area, there were the following services. Did you know about them? No. Would you have used them if you had known about them? Yes. And here, the idea of the family relationship centres was born, that people going through a separation or just going through a difficult time in their relationship need highly visible and accessible services they can go to get help. And
do they still exist?
Oh, yes.
And because, I must admit, until I spoke to you, I didn't know about them myself. Okay. But how would someone find one?
So they're called family relationship centres. There were 65 across the country. I think there may still be 65, but maybe one less. They are in many suburbs, wherever you may live, in country towns. And even if they're not in your country town, they probably will have a team visiting once a fortnight to your country town. What do? They're mostly about post-separation. And the idea that behind them was that within a short time of your separation, or beforehand, you might just be thinking about it, you go to a family relationship centre, and they are there to help you understand the range of issues that you may have and what services and help you might need. It might be a domestic violence service. It might be a gambling service. Yep. It might be child support that they have problems with, maybe housing. And there's also the parenting arrangements for the kids if they have separated. And so the FRC would then invite the other parent to say, look, we've been contacted, we're here.
Yep.
They should go through an information session built on the ones the family court developed years and years ago, maybe a 3-hour information session, always with mum and dad separate, in different sessions, talking about, well, what works for kids after separation, what doesn't work, what are the things to avoid, what arrangements might be appropriate at different ages, just to inform them and get them thinking about what are suitable arrangements after separation, and then to offer mediation to them if they are suitable for that.
And this was all funded by the Commonwealth Government?
In our original vision, it was completely free, funded by the government completely, but run by different non-government organisations. But you wouldn't know which organisation was running it.
Yes.
They're all badged as family relationship centres. You can go on the web, type that into the website, and you will find a list of them.
So how then is Publica, which is your new venture and passion, how is that sort of evolving out of that, or has it got a different vision?
So just to complete on the FRCs, it's no longer free, but it is very, very heavily subsidised.
Okay.
And the idea is that get some arrangement in place around parenting. It actually doesn't matter very much what, as long as the kids are seeing both parents and they're willing to work out all the difficulties of transition between homes and so on, and then come back a couple of times in the next couple of years to tweak those and deal with them as circumstances change. That was the idea of our.
And what I've read is that there was it was able to be identified that as a result of the introduction of them, there was a definite reduction in the number of child-related proceedings in the following years.
Yeah, in the subsequent 5 years, I think it was around 32%. So significant. But also, Giles, a lot of people who would never have gone to court would have just given up. A lot of grandparents.
Yes.
And this was one of the most encouraging things. People would resolve the issues who would never have gone on to file a court case. It's just too hard, too expensive.
So the gap then, if they couldn't afford to go to litigation, and family relationship centre didn't exist, effectively they'd remain in a crisis, unmanaged crisis. Is that the type of scenario that was assisted by the introduction of the family relationship centre?
It was, but I don't think the majority of people would remain in crisis. What happens is that fathers walk away because it becomes too hard.
Okay.
And so it resolves in a certain way. It resolves typically, if the children are living with mum, mum holds most of the cards. And so dad acquiesces in whatever mum is willing for to organise and to and look, the great majority of mums want the father to see their children, so there's agreement about that.
Yes.
But sometimes it's difficult, and what we know from the research is that fathers tend to drop out of children's lives in these circumstances rather than start World War III within the family. So that's what happens. The long-term vision for family relationship centres was that 20 years from when they started, and it is now actually nearly 20 years, more fathers will be in contact with their children after separation than they were before.
And statistically, can you prove that that's happened?
Yes. Actually, I think I can't put my finger now on immediate research, but there was a very, very strong surge of involvement of fathers after the 2006 legislation, which has generally been very beneficial and widely supported by both mothers and fathers.
Yeah, wow.
This is not about women versus men, mothers versus fathers.
No.
This is about how we navigate a very difficult time in people's lives when there's a lot of ill feeling, a lot of grief, a lot of anger, all these things, and a lot of turmoil. And how do we navigate the future?
And on that, I mean, anecdotally, you don't need to go too far socially in your life to know that people are talking about the fact that separation and divorce just gets more and more common.
Yeah.
And the family court gets busier and busier.
Yeah.
Do you agree that that's the case? And if so, what do you think is the underlying reason for that?
So I have just gave a paper yesterday on the growth in the number of 15-year-olds who experience their parents' separation. 2 or 3 decades ago, it might be, by the age of 15, around 10%. It's now getting close to 40%
Wow.
of 15-year-olds will experience their parents living apart. 10% of all babies born in Australia are born to a mother without a father in the same household.
Yep.
Doesn't mean they're not in a relationship, but typically those relationships don't last. And then a lot of the others is the breakup of cohabiting relationships.
So why are we as a race, or at least an Australian population, because that's what we're really talking about at the moment, why are people so susceptible to the relationship that began breaking down in modern society?
That's such a huge question.
Too big, I know, but I'm just curious. It's something I'm curious about.
Too big a question. But we do see a range of things. I mean, let's be honest, male adultery. Males have a problem with fidelity, many of them, and with pornography, some of those issues, which drive a wedge with their female partners. Domestic violence is obviously a factor. Financial pressures are a big part of it. If you look at the sociological evidence on all of this, what you find is that women are more likely to stay with a partner who's a good financial investment. I'm sorry to put it in those terms.
No, I understand what you mean.
Yeah, if you have an enormous amount to lose from the breakup of the relationship, because
if you have a lot to lose,
you're doing well financially. Your husband has got a good job. You may not have the same earning power as your partner. As a woman, it's just logical that you'd be more likely to want to do everything you can to keep that relationship going. And men may have a lot to lose, of course, from breaking up. If they're devoted to their children, they realise that mum's likely to be the primary caregiver. So the more you have to lose, the more you have, you're going to make an effort to work through the difficult times that every marriage experiences. But it's very clear also that marriage matters. Cohabiting relationships with children break up at something like 3 to 4 times the rate that marriages do.
Wow.
And this has been shown in every study across the Western world.
Hang on, sorry, can I just check I understand that? Yeah. What you're saying is compare a marriage with children to a relationship where the parties are not married and they're in a cohabiting relationship and they have children.
Yep.
That is a group that's more likely to separate than the married group.
Yes, the risk of breakup is something like 3 to 4 times as high.
And do you understand the reason for that? Or what's the underpinning sort of perspective on why that can happen?
I think that marriage matters not in a legal sense, because it doesn't matter much in a legal sense, but it matters in an emotional sense. You have made this commitment before family and friends. You've made a fuss about the wedding. You have made commitments to each other, promises, vows to each other. And people don't give those up lightly. There's an internal sense of commitment to, I've made a commitment and I want to see it through, even through difficult times. And I'm not saying that cohabiting couples don't have that, but I'm saying they don't have it to the same extent.
Sure. And is there, and might be sort of, fascinating around the question of faith, but is there more of a tendency with, say, Christian or other religious marriages versus, say, just pure civil marriages that are without a religious foundation? Is there any research around that?
There is, and I think, well, very much depends on how you define a believer.
Yes.
I mean, people tick boxes in a sense as such, are you Anglican, are you Catholic? And it may make no difference to their lives whatsoever. But certainly devoted religious believers, people who've made a commitment to follow Christ, as I have, but committed Muslims and others, that sense of God is a part of this marriage. And that is actually very important.
Statistically may well be more significant, as intent to suggest that group would be more likely to remain married than pure civil marriages, or is that too difficult to actually distinguish?
I think that is that is broadly so. Having said that, a lot of Christians do go through divorce. I have myself, not my own choice. So it's not a guarantee in any way. I wouldn't want to gild the lily on this, but the research does show that faith really does matter in relationships, does matter in marriages. matters in your sex life too. Research shows.
Yeah, really?
Okay. So there's enormous positives.
Yes.
About having not only a faith and a God whom we pray and who we worship, but also that you have that shared commitment between you as a couple, which is so important.
Well, it's actually fascinating as well, because in the new law, there's I think a relation to dowry abuse. And I don't know much about that, but I'm assuming, because I gave a paper myself on the amendments a few months ago, that dowry is really the Australian law incorporating the many diverse ethnic groups that are within our society these days. Is that your understanding?
It is. And dowries have a strong history, don't they, in the Indian community, I think, but also in the Muslim community.
Yes.
And it's important that we recognise the different cultural traditions of all the people who make up Australia.
So the Australian government is actually doing that. It's taking advice in that regard from the Australian Law Reform Commission about making sure that our law is reflective of the ever-evolving cultural groups within our society. Is that a fair way of putting it? Or?
Well, certainly the Australian government and Parliament is. I can't remember whether the Australian Law Reform Commission specifically focused on that. But it is very important, isn't it, that we may be broadly an Anglo culture from history, but we are rapidly changing.
Yes.
27% or more of all Australians were born overseas. And a great many of them from the Indian subcontinent and from the Asian countries. And we have to have laws and support mechanisms which are culturally sensitive to that range of immigrants, as well, of course, as the Aboriginal community as well.
Well, it's interesting too, because I, in particular, and many practitioners I work with, have the opposite of that, which is that our law is sort of evolving to accommodate other groups, the broad community, I should say, and then there are others who come from other communities overseas, and their experience of our legal system is very different from their own, and that's really interesting. I mean, there's a huge section of the litigation community, or the people in litigation, that find our laws culturally a complete and utter sort of a zone that they just cannot relate to relative to the jurisdictions or the powers and laws that they that exist in the communities they come from. So it's not really something I'm asking you to comment on, but it's fascinating. Do you understand what I mean?
I absolutely do, and I think the secret here is in trying to develop as many support services as we can away from the courts.
Yes.
And this is where, again, the family relationship centres come in, because some of them are in areas with very high levels of ethnic minority groups. And part of their role is to reach out and try to engage with the different communities in their area. One of the most lovely stories I heard was of a family relationship centre in a very multicultural area of Sydney. And they organised cooking lessons for Sudanese fathers.
Wow.
Now, what's going on here? Sudanese refugees have come in quite large numbers to Australia.
Yes.
The trauma they've experienced, the difficulties of moving to a new country, puts pressures on relationships, and a number of them separate. And fathers who have always left the woman to do the cooking and the child rearing, which is very traditional, find themselves in a situation where every other weekend and during school holidays they're looking after the children on their own. How do you pack a school lunch?
Yeah.
How do you look after the kids for the weekend? And by engaging them in cooking lessons, in helping them in the practical things of parenting, they could also engage them in, now, how can we help you sort out your parenting arrangements? We offer a thing called mediation. And this is the creative, nuanced approach that we need to have, not to see parenting after separation as a legal problem, but a relationship problem.
I think what you're really saying is that it feels to me as though there's sort of like separation within the community. And by that, I don't mean in the legal divorce sense. I mean, people are becoming more and more separate from one another, community-wise. What you're describing sounds to be something that sort of connects people back to themselves and the groups that they need to be, like by a government facility or a government initiative, in order to bring community back together, which seems every day in the news to be going the wrong way.
And you asked me about Publica.
Yeah.
I founded that about 3 years ago, just a little over 3 years ago, in order to think afresh about how we can strengthen families and communities. We have enormous issues to do with loneliness. The most lonely age group of all are the 18 to 24-year-olds.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
A significant problem. We all know, you would know the problem of divorced men, divorced and separated men can be incredibly lonely, and high rates of suicide in that group. And fewer and fewer people are even forming couple relationships. Do you know in the 2021 census, amongst 25 to 34-year-olds, do you think is the prime sort of relationship forming time? Only 56.7% were actually in a couple relationship.
Okay.
Of 25 to 34-year-olds.
Yeah, that is surprising.
Yeah, and it's been a big drop-off. So we have a problem of forming relationships, maintaining and keeping them, and an epidemic of loneliness. And so Publica is all about, well, what can we do about that? And there's all sorts of ways.
And what can we do about it? Because that's actually the ultimate question, isn't it? And who does it and how does it happen?
Governments don't have many levers on this. But coming back to the Family Relations Centres, one of their key objectives, and John Howard was absolutely on side with this, is they need to be sources of help before people separate, to avoid separation. And that's been underemphasized. They're mostly about post-separation mediation these days. Yes. But it's incredibly important. I described to John Howard when I spoke with him about this, the best mediation service in Sydney. Well, I thought it was the best. I'm sure there are others would disagree. But at the time, it was in Parramatta, and it was about 2 kilometres from the train station or the bus station. And you drive down this street. You had to have a car. There was no real public transport. And it was dark room. And across the way from the mediation service was a demolished building. So it was just a sort of car park with rubble around. So I park in that car park, and then I go across the road to this very dingy door. And I go up a staircase with the most hideous green paint. And on the first floor is the best mediation service in Sydney.
And it's best because?
Well, they were just very professional.
They were very
capable. But all the obstacles to get that help, it wasn't visible, it wasn't accessible, it wasn't near where they go for their shops. And so the idea that we have the family relationship centres, some of this has happened, some of it hasn't, but that they should be highly visible to the community. When they first were started up between 2006 and 2008, I would go to pick up my son from out of school hours care. And there would be a leaflet about the Family Relationship Centre. I'd go to the GP surgery, and there would be a poster about the Family Relationship Centre. So they're highly visible and accessible, places where people can get the range of help that they need. Not all on the premises, don't get me wrong, because you can't have all the services people need. But somebody who will sit down and say, what's going on in your life? Now, here are some things which could help you, and then make the journey with them to ring up the service, make an appointment, put them on the phone, it's called a warm transfer, and then follow up to make sure that they've got the help that they needed. Now, this is not a big expense for government, but it's the sort of thing that we can do. There's also a lot we can do, I think, in parent and child education. A lot of people say, we should do more in schools on relationships. I would say nonsense. Because when you're 14, you're not thinking about what a relationship's going to be like when you're 30.
not building a relationship, maybe having one, but...
And not capable of understanding it. And that's fine. Let them be 14. But there are golden moments in people's lives when they are really open to education. And one of them is the birth of their first child. It's an exciting time. It's also a terrifying time.
It is a terrifying time. And the second?
you take this baby home from the hospital, and now it's your responsibility. You'll have help, of course, from community nurses and things. And that's it's a golden time when people are open to education. And in a program in the States, they said, okay, the run up to the birth, you learn about what's going to happen in the birth and how you breathe and epidurals and all those sorts of things that women need to learn about. And then they also said, now the most important thing you can do for your child after you bring that child home is maintain your own relationship.
Yes.
Now, how are you going to do that? And having that conversation. So there are things we can do very cheaply, very inexpensively, but Giles, we're not talking about these things.
No, I know, and that's why I'm here, because that's what I want to talk about. Because to me, it's the sort of we've got to start talking about it, and we've got to start creating a political will, or at least a social will that might then evolve to a political will to deal with the cause. I've adopted accepted the concept of cause and effect a long time ago, just like raw cause and effect. And I see the effect all the time. Yeah. And it's not terribly uplifting in the work I do. What I'm uplifted by is the possibility of the cause being looked at. Now, I think we're getting close to having spent a lot of time talking, which has been amazing. I have a couple of children, and they're budding sort of career aspirants. And what can you say just briefly to young people in their sort of last year of school, working out what they want to do by way of degree or career, about choosing something to do in the legal profession, and in particular your case of academia? What can you just inspire some young people with about academia?
For me, academia was a great boat to fish from.
Okay.
By which I mean that I had an obligation to teach for 6 to 8 hours a week for 1/2 of the weeks of the year. Right?
Yeah.
And I took that obligation very seriously, and I hope I was a good teacher. And I had an obligation to research and to write. But they gave me an enormous amount of flexibility, and academia gave me a platform from which I've done everything else. So I'm always amazed when people say, oh, I've read your article on this or that or the other. They maybe have read 3 out of 300 articles.
Yes. There's a lot.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And that's great. But it's the fact that I have written those articles and books which gets me the invitation to be around the table when the decisions are being made, which gets ministers to, ask me to come and see them, to seek advice on something or other, which gets me to write articles in the newspaper, and so on and so forth. And that's where the influence happens, is not in what you write academically, but in the position of authority and expertise that gives you to speak into the profession. I've quite often lectured to judges over the years and so on, and therefore have an impact.
So what would you say, what are you most proud of in your career, and what do you love most about it? Because there are very many aspects of everyone's job that can be mundane, but what is it about your job and your career and your life that you've enjoyed the most?
Some things I'm most proud of, I don't like that word, but you understand
I do.
What, why I say that. I'm proud of the impact on public policy. We haven't talked about this, but I led a review of the child support system. One of the hardest things I've ever done, I have to say. So did I enjoy it? It was incredibly complex, but there was real fruit from it. We transformed the way in which child support is calculated, and a lot of other areas alongside that in terms of welfare reform. The family relationship centres, as you say. I was very involved early on the issue of child sexual abuse in the churches, and have seen enormous fruit from that work. Did I enjoy it? My word, I didn't.
No.
It was very, very tough. I was working on child sexual abuse in the churches at a time when everybody was denying there was a problem. But that's often the way when you have real impact on the world around you. It's because you've been willing to do the hard yards and to sacrifice and to put your head down and to go through opposition and difficult times.
So how can you inspire young people to do what you do? What would you say is the overriding sort of benefit to them in their life that they can see and pursue and work towards?
A lot of men and women reach their 40s and 50s and wonder what they've done with their lives. And what I'd say to somebody is plan on not being that person.
Yeah.
Absolutely critical, in my view, that people who are 18, 20, 22 are thinking about finding a really good partner for their lives. Because particularly when you're dealing with difficult stuff, having a partner who is with you through the thick and the thin, who understands that, is enormously important. Build friendships which will last. And I say all this, Giles, because people invest in career and they want to get the best marks and they want to get the best jobs and this and that, the other. A lot of that is ephemeral. A lot of that doesn't satisfy. But your friendships that you make and maintain and keep for life, they will be your treasure. Your partnership, your children, they will be your treasure if you invest in them. And it's about getting that right balance. And there's all sorts of reasons why that won't happen for people unless they're intentional.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. You've been amazing the way you've answered questions that I've just come up with on the run. So thank you, and hopefully we can talk again Monday.
Thank you, Giles.
Thank you.